Welcome back to the Here We Go podcast. I am Trent Ging. That is Colin Phillips as usual. And you may notice another face on the screen right now. It is Zachary Smith, best known for a couple of different podcasts around the 412 podcast and the afternoon drive, which I usually get to watch on the way home from work.
Appreciate
So,
that.
Zachary, thank you for coming on, buddy.
Of course. I've been familiar with your work a little bit here lately. You reached out to me, asked me if I wanted to come on. I'm honored that you had me come on here. So excited to be here.
I appreciate it. Colin, welcome back. By the way, how did you shoot today?
Shot well, played well. Shot a 39, so that's always good. As long as I break 40, I'm pretty happy. So
I like it. So there may have been a talking point that came out yesterday in Steeler Nation. It might have got a little bit of attention on social media if anybody was paying attention. So Brandon Aiyuk signs the contract extension. The trade does not happen. Initial thoughts on when you saw the news break, and now that we've had a little bit of time to process, how are you feeling about it right now? Zachary, I'm going to throw it to you first.
Well, as somebody that does a couple podcasts and has kind of just been reaping the content benefits of the Brandon Aiyuk saga, this sucks. I wanted to go out as long as we could here and ride this thing out. Also, as somebody that recorded a podcast yesterday that was dated in 30 minutes because of Brandon Aiyuk signing after we were done putting it up. That part of it sucked. As a Steelers fan who watched his team kind of put all their eggs in that basket, that sucks. As somebody that was a little bit skeptical about the idea to begin with, I'm glad it's over. The thing that I want to really focus on out of those talking points, though, is them putting all their eggs into that basket, because I feel like very preventable the state of the wide receiver room that they have right now. It didn't have to be this way with going all in on Brandon Aiyuk and having their hearts broken at the last second because they weren't going to get him. And by the way, they were very confident that this was going to happen. Like multiple people in the organization that I talked to, very confident that this was going to happen. If you guys saw the confidence level by certain people within Steelers Twitter, I don't want to name anybody by name, but there were certain people that for sure thought that this was going down. That is why there were certainly people in the organization that exuded that confidence. But I'll throw some names out there that I thought would have been perfectly fine additions to the receiver room that wouldn't have broken the bank and you wouldn't have had to give up premium draft capital to do so. I thought Josh Reynolds would have been a perfect addition to this wide receiver room. He signed for 2 years, $9 million, just over $4 million guaranteed in Denver, leaving Detroit. Thought he would have been a perfect addition. Noah Brown, who was part of the secondary free agent market, with Houston having 10 NFL quality receivers, knowing that they were going to have to lose a couple. Noah Brown, who they had just brought back on a 2-year free agency contract prior to trading for Stephon Diggs, and there were some other names brought in. So John Mechie, they saw what he looked fully healthy, so they decided to part ways with Noah Brown. Would have signed him. I think that there was a lot of things about this. Curtis Samuel, 3 years, $8 million per in Buffalo. That's another one I would have been okay with. I just think that they got to a point where they didn't have to be with the Brandon Aiyuk situation. And I love the player, but I'm glad that it's over. I'm not necessarily upset that they didn't get him, but I'm upset that they didn't have a plan other than getting him.
I agree. Colin, what about you?
Well, you mentioned the plan for not getting him. I mean, frankly, I think that just means part of it means that they're just incredibly confident with Roman Wilson, which I am as well. I've been a Roman Wilson fan. He was a bona fide top 50 prospect throughout all draft boards. I'm with you. I'm going to be honest. I'm with you, Zach. I'm just so happy it's over. I mean, I was so sick of it. I know you're a main podcaster. You work with Alan and whatnot, and I think Derek, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, for your purpose, I'm sure it was awesome having that to keep continuation. But for me personally, dude, I'm just glad it was over. Me and Trent were very clear about it before. And when we first started doing podcasts, Trent, we were very clear. This dude's going to re-sign with San Francisco. Let's be perfectly clear, okay? And as much as I agree with you, Zachary, like, yeah, Noah Brown would have been awesome. Josh Reynolds was a name I didn't even think of, but I really like. I'm still kind of holding out hope for John Mechie. But all in all, I really do think that this just means that they're very confident in what Roman Wilson can do when healthy.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing with Roman for me is it's unfortunate that we didn't get to see him in pads because I think that's
So
really where
agree.
his game would have popped. The couple days that I was out there for training camp were the last couple days before they put the pads on, and I said to Alan when I was out there, to me, Roman Wilson and Peyton Wilson were the two best players the couple days that I was out there. Like he was really starting to stack days and it seemed comfortable within the offense. And then the first day of pads, he hurts his ankle, sprains his ankle. Luckily, it wasn't a high ankle sprain, and we're talking about him missing more time. But I just question how quickly he's going to be able to get up to speed with him not even having played in the game in the preseason. So while I am confident about what he's going to be as an NFL player down the road, I caution what the early returns of that will be, being that we didn't see him get a single rep in a game.
Yeah, I gotta say, I was completely against the whole Aiyuk thing from the beginning, and I was really kind of one of the few people banging on the drum that I'm like, this ain't gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. It didn't make sense for either side, in my opinion, to make the deal because San Francisco, there's a lot of statistics out there that state when he was off the field, their offense
Oh, yeah.
drastically changes. And so, like, why would you get rid of that guy who was, in my opinion, he was the second best player on their offense? It was
Yeah,
CMC,
they don't have
and it
another
was Aiyuk.
separator. They don't have another
No,
separator. Debo's a good player, but he can't run the tree like Aiyuk can do. And I mean, he changes the dynamic, especially like I don't think enough people talk about what he does as a blocker for them too. Like a lot of those long Christian McCaffrey runs are coming because of what he can do downfield blocking.
agreed, totally. So, I mean, I think he was going to be a perfect fit for the Steelers as far as what they want to do, and a guy that you can really count on to get open on a third down where you really need that first down. Like he was going to be your guy, and that's the thing that we still have questions on, or at least I do with George Pickens because you can see the growth and the progression in his game, but is he a guy that you can sit there and say like, we were all used to AB, like, dude, you need to play. Just throw them the ball. Like it doesn't matter who's guarding him. Was double coverage. They got a shell over top and they're trying to double underneath. Like didn't matter. Ben's going to force the ball to him. He's going to make a play. And can GP be that guy now? Like I don't know. That's all things we're going to be waiting to see if it gets answered as we get into this season. So
yeah, I will say one thing that I saw at training camp from him, and I've talked with Alan, who's been there every day, with him about is he has seemed to diversify his route tree a bit. I think that's really what he's working on. I mean, the release package obviously still isn't great, but they got him doing digs, they got him doing curls. We're not just talking about a guy running fly go routes in deep posts at this point, just saying, hey, throw the ball up and he's going to win the 50-50 balls and turn them into 80-20 balls. Actually, probably a higher percentage towards George than even 80 on those balls. But they have him doing a lot of different things. And I think the one thing, for as many concerns as I have about the passing game within Art's offense, the one thing that he certainly can do is get guys free releases. I think that's probably why there is a little bit of hope for what he can do with Calvin Austin, what he can do with a smaller guy in Roman Wilson, because he can get those guys free releases, kind of disguise them, get them in motion, and do a lot of different things. So I think that you're going to see a different version of George. Maybe not full. I'm not talking about, a guy that can run every route on the tree like Deontay or Antonio in the past, but I do think that you are going to see a more expansive route tree from George.
So let me go this way because I'm glad you brought up Calvin Austin, because one of the things that obviously Aiyuk not being here means that there's opportunity for other guys in this wide receiver room, maybe to prove some people wrong, or maybe to show that they are exactly who we have thought they were in the beginning. I'm going to start with you, Colin. What do you think this means for Calvin Austin? Because I felt like in the preseason he disappeared in the times where the starters were on the field, and then he would come on as some of the guys and the backups would filter in. But, and Zachary, I think actually you and Alan talked a little bit about this, that he seemed to do better when Russell Wilson was at quarterback rather than Justin Fields. So,
Correct.
Colin, I'm going to throw it to you first. What do you think this means for a guy like Calvin Austin?
Well, I mean, like you said, it gives him that much opportunity. I mean, I'm going to preface by saying that another thing with this Aiyuk thing, it really shows us how much we miss Deontay Johnson, right? He could run every tree or every route in the tree at an incredibly effective rate. Okay. We don't even know if we have a guy like that right now. But in terms of for Calvin Austin, I mean, Trent, you and I have talked about this, man. You know what my feelings on Calvin Austin are. Frankly, I think this is a bigger opportunity for a guy like Van Jefferson or a guy like Scotty Miller emerging as that wide receiver 3/4, barring whatever's going on with Roman Wilson. And frankly, out of the three of those receivers that I named between Scott Miller, Van Jefferson, and Roman Wilson, I really do think this benefits Roman Wilson the most because, like Zachary said, coming from a guy who we didn't get to see in pads at all, we didn't get to see in any preseason action, a guy like him can really benefit not having another elite receiver on the roster. Like if we were to have maybe Aiyuk or Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, Calvin is an interesting case for sure because he had a great spring. I mean, if you ask most people that were around the team during, mandatory minicamp and OTAs, they would have said that's the most improved player on the team, along with maybe Spencer Anderson. He got a lot of buzz in the spring, but that carried over for him. For Calvin, the difference was when they threw the pads on and when Russell wasn't participating as much, he disappeared. And that even transferred over into those preseason games that you weren't seeing. So then the questions have to enter your mind. Okay, is it just about chemistry with the quarterback, or is this just who he is and he doesn't have the play strength to really be able to his game translate when they put the pads on? And I don't know what camp that I necessarily stand in right now. I've always kind of viewed Calvin as a guy, well, I say always, but really once Art came in as the offensive coordinator, I kind of envisioned him having a role, like I'm going to throw a name out there that you guys maybe are familiar with, Khalif Raymond, that Art had in Tennessee, where he was not not a fully gadget type player, like a fine wide receiver but a lot of special teams was how he contributed. That's kind of the role that I thought that Calvin would kind of be put in within this offense. The problem is that I think based off how I feel about Roman early on, not necessarily projecting here long term, but just early on in the season, and to be honest, kind of uninspired by Van Jefferson, that I thought they needed to see some type of leap from, and I'm just not sure it's going to happen at this point.
Well, my question for you, Zachary, you talked about it very clearly. I mean, you said he's the most improved player. I mean, he's shown in those 3 preseason games and last year during regular season. I mean, the guy's barely gotten the upside as a punt returner. He hasn't returned a single kick yet. So, I mean, Khalif Raymond has been just fine. He showed his entire career, both in Tennessee as well as in Detroit, that he's a fine punt returner. He's a fine wide receiver 4. He's a fine route runner. But Calvin Austin has shown none of those things. So I understand that he might be the most improved, but what's the point of enhancing the role of a guy who's shown no special teams upside and no receiving upside? Like, why would you make him the wide receiver 3 over a guy like Roman or Scott Miller?
And I wouldn't. Let me preface by saying that this is me just kind of going, like, reading the tea leaves and how I feel like it's going to happen. And also, like, within saying that, I'm somebody that doesn't believe that that's going to carry over because I saw it happen from spring into training camp. Like, I'm of the belief, I feel like I have a pretty good idea what Calvin is as a player. The one caveat that I'll throw in there as well, along with the quarterback change, along with him throwing the pads on, one thing that I do think is different this year as opposed to last year is fully healthy from the foot thing. I really do think that was still impacting him even last year. And the reason that I believe that is a conversation. I don't want to tie another conversation in here, but Larry Ogunjobi was talking to us at training camp and he was like, my foot is finally healthy. Like he's been here for 2 years and he feels like his foot is finally healthy. Like those things, man, they're weird injuries. You never know how they're going to go. Calvin feels like he finally is back. I thought that he definitely did look better in and out of breaks from like in this spring as opposed to the way that he looked on film in 2023. Again, I'm not a Calvin Austin believer by any means. I just think that early in the season, he is going to play over Roman. Would I do that? If Roman can go, I'm getting his feet wet. But I just think that we see more Calvin Austin early on.
I think you're right, honestly. I personally would. And it's interesting because Colin and I have kind of been on the same wavelength with the rookies, which I'm typically not. But we've been on the same wavelength saying, like, we are going to be such a team I think we're in a rebuild, whether people want to admit it or not. And so I don't think we have Super Bowl expectations right now. Can we make the playoff with what we have? Yeah, I still think we can make the playoffs with what we have. But I don't think that we're a team that's like fully ready to go because we still don't know what we have at quarterback. We have such a young offensive line that I've kind of been of the mindset of start throwing these young guys out here now this year and get them going. And that way, if Russell Wilson exceeds expectations, they're ready to go. You're not filtering them in when the teeth of the schedule comes in after the bye.
Sure.
Same thing, if Russell flames out, Justin Fields comes in, he starts playing better, then again, these guys are up and running. Or if none of that happens and we get horrible quarterback play and we're drafting really early in the draft next year, when you get that guy, your other guys are already ready to go. You're just getting that final piece in there. So I've kind of changed my thought process on this, and that's kind of why I don't care if Roman Wilson's ready. I'd rather see him because I think he's got more upside than what we have right now. Who knew we had a fourth guest on the show right now, Colin?
Hey, he knows more than I do, so I
get the sense internally, Trent, that they feel similarly about this season. And I'll be honest, I think that we would, if Roman would have been able to come in healthy, I don't think that this is a conversation. I think if he doesn't suffer that injury the first day of pads, he would be the guy that we're talking about right now, having a more expanded role. And I think that there's some evidence to that with the way that they're treating like Beanie Bishop, slot corner, no competition. They cut every other competitor at that spot. He's going to be your day one starting slot corner despite being a UDFA signing. And then you look at the tackle situation. I'm telling you right now, like if those two guys were healthy, wouldn't even be a question that they're your left and right tackles. So Zach Frazier would have been the team starting center. They were going to roll out a lot of young or rookie players. I'm willing to call Broderick basically a rookie player if you're talking about him making the switch to left tackle and it'd be a rookie year over there for him, basically. So this team was ready to roll out a lot of rookies this year. A lot on offense, one on defense, a lot on offense. So I get the sense that they were looking at it very similarly to you. But unfortunately, at least in one case, the Roman thing, again, because of injury, I don't think it's going to happen right away.
Yeah.
I mean, were we really going to act like Zach Frazier wasn't going to be the starter to begin with? Like, I understand the Tomlin thing, like how he's like, hey, we got to warm this guy in. We got to kind of, slowly get him into that. But I think Zach Frazier was going to be the guy regardless. He was kind of like the one pick in this draft that I was incredibly confident was going to be a starter. If I'm going to be honest, I mean, I'm literally just going to, go right off of your point. If Roman Wilson would have been healthy all offseason, yeah, he would have showed up as wide receiver 1 against Atlanta for sure, or wide receiver 3. I'm sorry, first team wide receiver 3 against Atlanta as well. I'm completely gonna agree with you there.
Yeah. Now, how much does that guy play? I'm not sure because you're going to see a lot of tight ends within this offense. You're going to see a lot of times where there's 2 wide receivers on the field. You're going to see a lot of times there's only 1 wide receiver on the field, I'm sure, within this offense. So how big of a role are we even talking about for wide receiver 3? I don't know, but I definitely agree that he would be the guy getting the snaps in the slot.
It's kind of an interesting segue because I was going to ask this question that is kind of based exactly off of what your statement was. I think this is more of a talking point across a lot of people in Pittsburgh media. Roman Wilson, all right, he's not played for a month. Is he going to be up to speed on this offense? But if he's going to have limited snaps anyway, does he need to be that ready? Can you just throw him on the field with a quarterback sleeve and just say, here's the plays, this is what you're running? He's talented enough to go run that route and make a play if you need him to. Like, do you feel like it's that big of a talking point, or do you think he'd be comfortable just going ahead and throwing him in right now?
You know what? To be honest, I hadn't thought of that point. His role, or as limited as it might be, could that maybe be the deciding factor in how early he's ready? I hadn't really considered that. But I'll say, like, it's not like the guy I mentioned that he had a couple nice days in a row when I was there. But I can't speak as if I've seen all the work that he did leading up to it. So I'm kind of just going based off, what Alan tells me, what I've seen in other reports. He was really struggling at one point though. And that's like rookies are just bad when they when they first get drafted. There's certainly a learning curve. If you guys followed along last year, and I know that you did, so I'm more so talking to anybody watching or listening to this, like Joey Porter Jr. last year, right? Awful in the spring. Started to pick it up in training camp, looked at the rookie year that he had. But he didn't miss time the way that Roman Wilson did. And that's the only question, is how much is that specifically going to impact him? And I'm not even talking about necessarily physically, just like, does he have the mental reps as well to be able to step into that offense? But to your point, with the role that he's going to take or lack thereof, does that matter?
Yeah, here's where I was going to go with that. And this is kind of my thought process, and then I'm going to throw it over to you, Colin. But my thought process on this is, if we're going to run so much of the 2 tight end sets, and you're going to put him out there sparingly to try to create, some open space plays where you can maybe even put him as a focal point outside of obviously George Pickens and then Pat Freiermuth are your top two receivers, really.
Yeah.
Can he go in and do that? Because we really got Joey Porter Jr. on the field by saying, hey, this is a 3rd down and long. They're throwing the ball. Just cover the guy. Can we do the same thing with Roman Wilson? Like, it's in an obvious passing situation. We just need you to run this route, get open, and make a play. And that's kind of where I was looking at it, to why I was like, does he really need to be that highly up to speed? I don't know. So, Colin, what do you think?
Well, I mean, frankly, I agree with you. I mean, he really doesn't need to be that really that up to speed. I mean, to both your points, we're going to use a ton of 2 tight end personnel. I mean, how many times are we realistically going to have the wide receiver 3 on the field at one time? And then it's also a matter of the fact that, well, for starters, we're going to run first offense to begin with. But it's also a matter of, like, I love your point about Joey Porter. It's like, all you got to do is go out there, run this route, you catch the ball, right? I mean, he has he's a good route runner. He's proven it in college. He has a high separation rate. And let's be perfectly clear, speaking of Joey Porter, he cooked Joey Porter at Michigan in 2022. I'm sorry. I mean, I think he's a good enough player to step in right away, healthy or not. That's honestly my exact thoughts. I think he's more than a good enough player to step in right away and just be the wide receiver 3. It won't happen, but it should.
Yeah. So how about this? Because, I mean, I don't think anybody loves the wide receiver room on Steelers Twitter right now. There's not a lot of options out there right now. I think Hunter Renfrow is probably like the top guy who isn't playing for a team right now.
I mean, if you want to block Roman Wilson even more, that one certainly makes sense.
Yes.
He just plays in the slot. So I mean, I don't know that one's like, people threw out the names to me, like Russell Gage, who got cut in Baltimore, played a year with Art in Atlanta. I actually put out there for anybody that watching, listening to this, that also watches or listens to Around the 412. I dropped a little bit of a nugget on today's podcast that somebody texted me last night while we were recording, and they sent me my own post from like 2 months ago. Where I put out that the team was in contact with Michael Thomas, and they said, watch for this to happen again. They could circle back. I don't know that that's one that I'm super interested either. I think that ankle's cooked. I mean, we all know how good Michael Thomas was at one point in time.
He's suspended a game too.
He is also suspended for the first game of the season. I don't know that that's something I'm super interested in. And I also think, like, I mean, is he worth maybe bringing in to get a look at him and see how that ankle does look? Yeah, sure. That's not going to do any harm, but yeah, I don't see an upgrade anymore. Like, it's to that point where, as bad as the Steelers wide receiver room is to me, top to bottom, I don't look at the outside and see, yeah, that guy's definitely somebody. I'll be honest with you. I think the 2 guys on the practice squad aren't the 2 worst receivers on the roster right now.
Probably right. Honestly, I mean, like, well, one of them,
Ben Skowronek is a special teams demon, played in 5 phases. And I don't know that he's, again, you're not going to say, hey, here's our X receiver, Ben Skowronek, but he is a guy that can block very well. He can actually do some H-back stuff, which is very interesting. And I think that he's just like an Arthur Smith type of receiver. And then Brandon Johnson actually had some intriguing tape from 23 with Russ in Denver. Like, I was going back watching, he only had 19 catches last year, but he's smooth. He's a bigger bodied guy. 19 catches before touchdowns. So the production, it was kind of there as well. Like 20% of his catches going for touchdown. And there's obviously a reason that Zach Azzani and Russ wanted to bring him in. So I think that they could do worse from a practice squad receiver perspective. But yeah, I don't think that they're the 2 worst options. Did you guys see, I put a tweet out about this as well. I think, Trent, you responded to it. No idea what in the world they were doing trying to get Noah Brown on the practice squad as opposed to just adding him to the 53.
I'm dumbfounded. I have been basically shouting from the rooftops about Noah Brown. Like, I have been that dude just was, number one, if for nothing else, he's a totally different body type than everybody else we have stashed on the roster, not named George Pickens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I thought, Van Jefferson's not a good blocker. We're going to be a run-first team. He's not a good blocker. Calvin Austin, I mean, he might be able to throw himself on the ground and trip somebody on the way to go tackle someone, but he ain't blocking him.
Sure.
Roman Wilson is small. Scotty Miller is small. I mean,
he's bigger than AB.
But I mean, even those guys are scrappy guys. But that wide receiver too, I think, needs to be a pretty solid blocker the way Arthur Smith runs his offenses. So I thought from that standpoint,
I'm telling you, Ben
Skowronek's
Skowronek's going to be very important by like week 4.
Ben Skowronek, he's a Notre Dame boy. I'm all for it. And like you said, he's a special teams ace. He is an ace on special teams, like Zachary
I do
said.
wonder.
I love
I do
that.
wonder if because they need gunners, and I know that like Scotty Miller
Miles
right now
Boykin.
kind of penciled in for one. Well, no, I was say Ben Skowronek could be one of those. Like maybe he's replacing the Scotty Miller gunner part of that. And I don't know what the other idea is. Maybe Darius Rush, but he wasn't even. They didn't even have him on like punt towards the end of the training camp and preseason, so I'm not sure what the plan is there.
If Ryan Watts was healthy, he would be, because I thought he did a fine job personally. I didn't really get to dive into the film that much, but it's like, how many late rounders are we going to get year after year after year that just have season-ending injuries in the preseason, man? I mean, you got Calvin Austin in 22. Wasn't that the reason we cut Buddy Johnson in 21? Am I incorrect to say that? I mean, you got
sure. But
I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
Trice,
I'm pretty sure Buddy in 2021, Calvin Austin in 22, Trice last year, and now Ryan Watts this year. And I'll tell you, Ryan Watts, I liked what I saw. I know he's going against, Walmart cashiers next week. But, I mean, regardless, I thought he did a fine job as a gunner. I thought he did a fine job in run defense. So,
dude,
whatever.
You're saying that, but he was also like, in training camp matching up with tight ends, and he got a few reps against Muth, and he held his own. So, I mean, like, I think that there's definitely a player in Ryan Watts.
I agree.
I'll say this: if he can take this opportunity and then come back next year and look the exact same way that Corey Trice looks this early this year, I think that's a win.
Well, I was actually just going to ask you that, Zachary. I mean, you're a lot closer to the big dogs than we are. I mean, is it pretty much going to be Trice or Darius Rush penciled into that CB3 spot?
Oh man, yeah, it's Trice. Like
Awesome.
Rush was the guy entering training camp that was higher up on the depth chart, and that was even the first couple for the first couple of weeks of training camp. But Trice was awesome down the stretch. I'd say probably leading up to that first preseason game, he kind of overtook Rush, and then carried that over and played really well in the preseason as well. Had a little bit of a groin thing pop up, but that was just precautionary. They said, like, if this was a regular season game, he's not getting pulled out of that game. So yeah, I think he's fine. I think he's going to have a pretty nice role for this team. I kind of envision, if you guys remember the year that Cincinnati went on their Super Bowl run, 21. They had a corner, Trey Flowers, who was 6'4", and like the only role that he had was, hey, go cover when somebody's lining their tight end up in the slot. Well, you look at the AFC North with David Njoku, who sees a ton of snaps in the slot, Mark Andrews, who sees a ton of snaps in the slot, and then Cincinnati just brought in Mike Gesicki, who plays a ton not in line as well. I think that we're going to see quite a bit of Corey Trice.
Yeah, he has looked good. I mean, there was talk last year about him actually being better than Joey Porter Jr. early.
He was until he got hurt. Yeah.
I think a lot of people tend to forget about that just because he was gone all last season. But he's a talented guy, and he's just somebody who's been constantly held back by injuries. So he's intriguing, but maybe possibly even a guy who could be a starter at one point. He keeps on this trajectory.
I mean, speaking of getting held back by injuries, I mean, Zachary, me and Trent have talked about it. I think you and I talked about it last podcast. Am I correct about like how worried are we really about Peyton Wilson having another damn injury? Like, at what point do we sit there and say this guy's made of Lego? I mean, how worried are you, Zachary?
I don't know that I am. Like, I think that it's just one of those things. Like, he played, I know that the list of injuries is super long, but if you look going back to his junior and senior years, he played at least 11 games in back-to-back years, those 2 years. So it's been relatively clean since then. I know that a lot of people were super worried when he, popped up with that concussion in that preseason game, but clearly was able to get back on the field. Or it wasn't even a concussion that he was diagnosed with. I'm sorry. I should say they were worried because he had concussion symptoms. He never was officially diagnosed with a concussion from that. But I mean, he's just, dude, he looks different. Like, I'll say, like, I think you have to see him in person to appreciate it. Cause like a lot of people are like, oh, like that's a fast linebacker. He's probably a pretty small dude. He is a massive dude that moves differently than anybody else his size.
Like
I'm super excited.
245. Yeah.
Yeah. And can run with anybody. So like, like, injuries can happen to anybody. I know they've happened to him more often than a lot of people, but as we sit here right now, that's not something that's like entering my mind.
Okay.
Yeah. What about so another piece of the domino that I think starts to fall probably really soon here. Now that the Aiyuk thing is kind of done, I felt like a lot of the contract extension talks were basically paused until they found out whether or not Aiyuk shows up. So, who do you think gets extended? And do you have a price tag? Because that's going to be a hot topic. I think.
I'll let him go first.
I'm a little personal to the situation. This is I mean, me and Muth are boys, so like I feel like I got to preface by saying that Pat's going to sign an extension. Yeah. I'd be very surprised. You could ask me, say we're making another appearance on this podcast in like a week. I would be confident telling you right now that he'll sign an extension before we talk again.
Okay, so number one, can we book
you
in that week?
I'd feel confident. I'd feel confident telling you that it's going to be 4 years.
Over 10 million?
Right within there.
Stop. All right, that's nope.
I've seen 10. I've seen some people pushing at 12.5, which I think is just under in Njoku. I know he's not the only person I've actually seen say that. I've actually seen a number of people saying 12.5 to 12 is where he should push.
Well, I mean, you look at he's got the same agent as Cole Kmet, and you look at the deal that he signed in Chicago. I'm not saying he's going to align directly with that. I'm saying that's probably a contract that they're taking to the table.
I think so too.
Listen, both of you guys, I promise you it's not my Penn State anti-bias speaking here, but let's be perfectly clear. I mean, Cole Kmet is a way better, not way, I know that's your boy, I'm sorry, a better general player, blocking, run after catch ability, stuff like that, like the little things. I mean, I love Muth. I am been pounding the table for the Steelers to extend him. For me personally, I think acceptability is around like the 3-year, like 3-year 30, like 3-year 32, 3-year 32 mil, like from 9 to 10.5 mil a year APY. Like I think 12 is just a little bit too much because we're really realistically talking about like that tight end 13 to 16, 17 range in the league. I mean, on a good day, he's tight end 10 maybe, but like realistically, we're talking ballpark at tight end 12. I would give him not anywhere from 9 to 10.5. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Which is where I think it's ultimately going to come in at, right around.
Okay,
like,
awesome.
Like 3 years, 32. You're talking about add one more year to that. Add maybe 8 million more to that or something like. So It's basically it equals the same thing. I know that there's some concern, obviously, because of concussions and stuff like that. See, it's an interesting dynamic because I know that the production hasn't always been there. He could certainly be better as a blocker. By the way, his uncle was an offensive line coach, and that's something that he's been working on a ton this offseason in preparation of playing within this offense. And I think that it's kind of a bet on what he's going to be within this offense more so than it is what he has been. You look at what Art's offenses does for tight ends, whether it's Kyle Pitts and John. People make a lot of jokes about Kyle Pitts. He had 100 targets last year. Like, I understand that. And there's not somebody like Jonnu Smith that was taking 70 of those away on the Steelers depth chart either at tight end. I love the tight end room. I think that there's a lot of different dynamics within there, but there's not a Jonnu Smith pass catching type to be that second option. And you look at what there was in Tennessee where Jonnu and Delaney Walker were both eaten at times there. Like, this is a very tight end friendly offense. And I think that the contract Pat's going to get is going to be representative of what he is going to be or hopefully going to be, as opposed to what he has been within Matt Canada's offense.
I'll say this, and I hope he doesn't watch this show because he's friends with you, but I've said this from the beginning. It's in the Steelers' best interest to sign him right now because in this offense and knowing what we know about what Arthur Smith's going to want to do, his price tag is going to go up drastically after this season. And there's a lot of people who are not big fans of him, and they want to let him go. And I'm like,
it's a bad time. I told him it was a bad time for him to be. Told him it was a bad time for him to need a contract because of all the Brandon Aiyuk hoopla and stuff like that playing into it too. I know he's definitely seen quite a bit of the conversation surrounding his name.
Get back to his rookie year with Ben, which was, let's be honest, it was a shell of Ben Roethlisberger compared to what he had been in the past. Muth was a real good tight end, and I think a lot of people had huge, huge expectations for him after that season. And then, of course, you just get absolute garbage quarterback play for 2 years in a row, and it hurts his stock.
And Matt Canada's offense.
That's a whole other show in itself. But
it is.
I just think like the Steelers would be absolutely stupid not to sign him right now. And to be honest with you, I've actually made an argument that I think Pat Freiermuth should wait until after the season, because I think he's going to capitalize on that money after the season. But as a fan, I really want to see this thing get done now and make sure we have him locked up, because I think he's going to be an integral part of this offense, not only this year, but in the future, because we've got Arthur Smith for 3 years. So you have to at least extend him 3 years to keep him within that offense, and also make sure we have something for a long-term game plan, beyond him if we don't put another contract on him. So
sure,
I think it makes sense.
Well, so two things I have just based off that. I mean, so the fallacy that Kyle Pitts got no targets is actually incredibly untrue. I mean, it's fallacy. Like I said, he actually got more targets than Deontay Johnson last year. Granted, Deontay only played, Zachary, 12, 13, Trent, is it like 12, 13, 14 games?
He got hurt week 1 and didn't return until like week 7 or something against LA. He got hurt in week 1.
Oh, was that much? Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I might be a little far off. I was thinking it was like 13-ish games he actually played. And he still had less targets than Kyle Pitts. So that's another fallacy. And then I actually did the math multiple months ago, and I posted on Twitter between Najee and Algier, because I know it's something that people want to talk about, that Arthur Smith didn't give Bijan enough touches. And so between Bijan and Algier, and then Najee and Warren, Bijan and Algier actually had like 15, 14 more carries combined than the other two. I figured I'd note that as well. But no, I mean, to your guys' point, I'm a Muth guy. I'm a huge Muth guy. I think, dude, if you're sitting there with a top 12 tight end in football, you retain that, because it's not a premium position. It's not one that you should be rotating all the time, kind of like a running back or, a strong safety or, a will linebacker or whatever. It's one of those things where it's like, if you got it, you just keep it, So yeah, the selfish part of me says absolutely. Let's re-sign Muth ASAP.
I think even if the offense struggles, he pushes well above top 12.
Well, he's a second target. I mean, he's a second target. I mean, he's his only competition for target 2 in the passing game is Van Flippin Jefferson. I mean, how hard is it going to be for him to be that second target?
Yeah, I think he's probably going to push into that top 6 or 7 range if things go his way. And I don't see a reason why it wouldn't. So the second big name on the table right now is obviously Cam Hayward. So, Colin, I know your thoughts, but I'm going to let you go ahead and kick this thing off. So do you think this gets done with Cam before the season, and would you extend him?
Well, it's a really tough situation for me personally, because me and you went back and forth for forever about this. So for starters, not re-signing him kind of backs us into a corner, because we don't know what Ogunjobi brings to the table. We don't know really what we have with Logan Lee. And then, Leal and Loudermilk are both huge question marks, and those are kind of supposed to be our depth pieces there. So, I mean, like I said, it really does kind of back us into a corner a little bit if we don't re-sign him. But that being said, say Ogunjobi actually, I mean, he had a good preseason. Me and you both kind of sucked it up and finally admitted it. He did have a good preseason. I mean, what's to say if he has a good regular season, we don't maybe give Ogunjobi another year or two to kind of stall time to get us younger at that position. I think, and Zachary can agree with this, it's pretty much essentially a guarantee that we will be picking like that interior defensive end, or that 3-4 defensive end, if you will, at a very high pick next year, right? Am I correct to say that? I mean, we're really old at the age, and frankly, we have no depth there. Mm-hmm. So all in all, I really do say at this point, yes, you re-sign him, but for a cheap price tag. I'm not paying Cam Hayward, that damn 36-year-old, no 16, no $18 million a year. I'm giving him 12 max.
I think What makes it tricky, right, is the wanting to play 3 more years. I think if it was just talking about adding an additional year, that's completely fine, and I think that there wouldn't even be, like, this contention going on with the conversation. I think it's because he's probably looking for a 2-year extension beyond this year, that there probably is some contention. I think that is the real sticking point here, along with probably the guaranteed money on the deal, because that's really what matters. I mean, they could throw any number on that contract, and it wouldn't matter. It really comes down to what's guaranteed there. To your point, Colin, I really think that the draft now is going to flip from we've seen them prioritize the offensive side of the trenches ever since bringing in Andy Weidel. I think that flips now to the defensive side here in the very near future where they start prioritizing that side of the trenches, which is what I expect to have happen. You need to get some long-term running mates with Keanu Benton in there sooner rather than later. I think Keanu Benton's he's my breakout candidate coming up for 2024. I think he's awesome. So but I don't know that there's a long-term solution beyond him right now along the defensive line. And for that reason, I think Cam holds a lot of cards within these contract talks because there's just not somebody else there right now. I know that Larry Ogunjobi, I just brought up that he feels like his foot's in a good place right now. I mean, I'll get to see it to believe it in the regular season. So we'll see how that goes. Monty Adams is a nice rotational piece. DeMarvin Leal's looked really good. Another really improved player this offseason in training camp. But he's going to be primarily an edge rusher for them at this point. Logan Lee, I mean, in most years, he's not even drafted. Like, I'm surprised that he's on the 53 right now. I wouldn't have thought. I thought they were going to stash him on the practice squad, say, hey, gain like 75 pounds, and you're just going to end up being a defensive tackle for us as opposed to this tweener. I just don't see it along the defensive line. I think Cam Hayward ultimately is going to be back on an extension. I have no clue what the number is going to be, but I feel pretty good about saying that they'll get something done.
Yeah, I agree. I've actually been in the minority on this. I think Cam Hayward has a monster season, and that's why I'm okay paying him. And I don't care what they pay him, as long as it's within the mindset that he's 35, he's going to be 36 next year. And I would like to see a 2-year deal get done because I don't think he signs a 1-year deal. I think he's going to test the market. But I think if they get him for a 2-year deal, it works for the team. It should give him a little stability. And listen, I've said I really, really think Cam Hayward's going to have a strong season, and I think I put him at like 7.5 sacks because I really think
so. That's the part where I'm not all that I think the run defense is going to be back. I think it was still fine for the most part last year when he came back. I'm curious to see what the explosiveness looks like, what the pass rush ability looks like. But to be honest, like in terms of those reps, man, like because you have Benton, because you have potentially a healthy Larry Ogunjobi, like I don't know that you need that much in terms of the pass rush juice from Cam. You got 3 edge rushers that can go as well with Nick Herbig behind Watt and Highsmith. So I'm also bullish overall about Cam the player, but in terms of like the sack production, I'd probably start it more in like the 5-ish range where I feel like right now.
Yeah, I could be completely off on this. I am still thinking he's not going to play as much as what he's done in the past. And I think that if Leal continues to come along like he has, and he can give a breather here and there, the reason I think he gets 7.5 is I still think they're going to want him in crucial pass down situations where he can push the interior along with Keanu Benton, because Benton's going to provide pressure. But I think Cam can still bring that juice of pushing those guards back, because I think he's not going to see the double teams now. It's going to move over to Benton, and that's where Cam is going to start to come forward and play a little bit more back to form. So I could be off base on that, but I just feel like he's been a dominant player for a long time, and I don't see why he doesn't pick back up where he left off.
Well, I mean, my thing with
no, I get. I was just saying I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, so my thing with Cam is what I'm most excited for him as a player right now. I mean, he's an absolute stone wall in the run game, and that's a fact. I think in regards to the pass rushing aspect, you guys are talking about sack numbers. Let's be perfectly clear, and I will preface this. I have been the leader of the Keanu Benton agenda since the second he got drafted. You know why? Because I called that damn pick back in February of 2023. I was like, Keanu Benton, you are a Pittsburgh Steeler. I've been calling for him as an all-pro, as a start. He should have been a starter from day one last year. Enough Armand Watts or Montravis Adams or whomever, right? Enough. Let's get Keanu Benton in the game. But yeah, I mean, in regards to the pass rush ability from the interior, I'm more confident in Keanu Benton. As long as Cam Hayward's just a wall in terms of the run game, because we've seen Benton, I'm sure Zachary and Trent, you've both seen it on film too. He's been a little bit like kind of shaky sometimes in the run game, sometimes in over pursuing or whatnot. But in regards to the pass rush, I think Keanu Benton has that ability. So, I mean, as long as Cam can just be a beast in the run game, and especially in short yardage situations in the run game, like 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, whatnot, I'm really excited for it. And in that case, I will sign him. And let's all be perfectly clear. The last thing I'll say about Cam Hayward, let's all be perfectly clear. We know Mike Tomlin's going to get that dude signed. Like, let's just bite the bullet and understand that Mike Tomlin is going to make sure that guy is a Steeler for at least another 2 years.
Yep. Yeah, I think so too. So, Colin, I know you were on a bit of a time crunch, so I definitely want to be respectful of your time. Smitty, I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your thoughts with us today. Colin, as always, it's been a great time. So,
always.
Smitty, why don't you go ahead? I'll treat this like you would afternoon drive. Why don't you tell the people where they can find you?
Man, that role reversal wasn't expecting that. Yeah, you can find me everywhere. Zachary Smith PGH. You can find my podcasts at Around the 412 and then Steelers Afternoon Drive on all platforms. Obviously on YouTube, we got the video form of the show, and then Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast, you can find both the shows there as well.
Perfect. All right. Well, guys, I appreciate you coming on. For anybody watching or rewatching after the fact, please like, share, subscribe. We're just doing this for fun. We're not trying to make any money off this thing. It's just a way. I've said this about 3 or 4 times now, but
be pretty nice though, right?
My wife. It is fun. It's a good time. I like it. Be a good time if you get paid for it. But this is just a way for me to get my wife to not kill me for talking Steelers football all the time. So. So appreciate you guys coming on. We wrap this thing up. Smitty, love to have you back on again. Anytime, you're welcome.
Yes. Hey, Zachary, it was an absolute pleasure, my friend. I appreciate you coming on with us here. And Trent, appreciate it again, big dog.
No problem. All right. Have a good one.
Yep, you as well.